And let's move on into our last topic before I go ahead and make my picks for week number 2 or week number 3, pardon me. I'm on this week number 2 thing because I missed last week. But what we're talking about to end the podcast today is basically the 2020 NFL Draft and Jalen Hurts. I wanted to last week before I was kind of figuring out how this would work, doing the podcast here from my home studio. But I kind of wanted to talk about Jalen Hurts after week 1, and he had just about this, against Houston, had a really good game. Then I know it was South Dakota, but had a really good game against South Dakota. So what I'm going to look at is, instead of answering the question, can Jalen Hurts win the Heisman? Because I already kind of mentioned that in my Heisman predictions. He could. I said he'd kind of be a dark horse. I'm kind of kicking myself in the butt because I didn't go off. I didn't put myself out there and say what I was thinking. I was kind of scared, in my opinion. Didn't want to be fully out there and be wrong. That ain't me. You guys know me. I'm not like that, so I'm kind of mad at myself that in those predictions I didn't say, yes, he will win the Heisman, and I kind of backed off and was like, oh, well, he could be a dark horse. But he's played 2 great games, and I want to kind of ask the question and throw it out there. LeVar Ball, speak it into existence per se. Will Jalen Hurts be the number 1 overall pick in the 2020 NFL Draft? I know what you guys are thinking. Ricky, you're going to do this a lot. Like Mark and you earlier on the onside kick, before the season even started, asked who would be the number 1 pick, and you said it'll probably be a guy like Chase Young or a Tua Tagovailoa. Then Sean and I here on the PTP had a conversation of just who could be we had a conversation of Jerry Jeudy, if he could be the number 1 pick. And that one was kind of a little bit out there. But Jerry Jeudy, we expected to have a really good year this year. But now we've actually seen games, and Jalen Hurts through 2 games. So against Houston, he went 20 of 23 through the air, 332 yards, 3 touchdowns, 175 on the ground, 3 more on the ground. He had a total of 6 touchdowns in that game. Now, against South Dakota, he didn't have as many rushing yards. He only had 47, didn't get on the ground or get into the end zone on the ground in that game. But through the air, on 18 attempts, 14 completions, threw for 259 yards and 3 touchdowns. And the thing I was kind of looking up is, you look at the last 2 Heisman winners. Yes, they both came from Oklahoma. The last 2 first overall picks came from Oklahoma. Through their first 2 games, I mean, Kyler Murray's kind of interesting because in that first game, he only threw the ball 11 times. I don't remember in that game if he got injured. I don't think he got injured in that one. But in that one, he had 209 yards, 2 touchdowns. But the next 2, if we use the next 2 as our barometer, UCLA, 19 of 33, 306 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 on the ground. So kind of around the same ballpark as Jalen Hurts. 5 total in 1 game, 2 through the air in 1 game. Then you got Baker Mayfield against El Paso, Texas. He threw for 329 yards, 3 touchdowns. Didn't have many rushing yards. He didn't really get going on the ground until the Baylor game, 4th game of the year. Then against Ohio State, 386 yards, 3 touchdowns, none on the ground. So kind of similar to Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts also through the air has had 3 touchdowns in his first 2 games. And the thing that it's going to come down to is, I know what you guys are saying. Oh, but Ricky, Tua Tagovailoa is in this class. And the thing I'm starting to think, and this is kind of floating around in my mind, is think about the quarterbacks that we have this year. Tua, Jake Fromm, Justin Herbert, Jalen Hurts, and then that 5th, I would say most people are going to put either Jacob Eason or KJ Costello, whichever Pac-12 quarterback you like better outside of Herbert. And when you look at, to me, Kyler Murray's year was different. We didn't have many quarterbacks in that draft class, but think back to Baker Mayfield's class. And if I go back, that's 2018. We had Sam Darnold. We had Josh Allen. We had Baker Mayfield. I'm missing two more. Lamar Jackson was one of them. Oh gosh, and I'm missing a big one. This is what happens when you try to do it live. So we have Baker, Darnold, Allen, Josh Rosen. The two Joshes. And then Lamar Jackson were the five. If I look at it, early in the year, Sam Darnold and I'm not talking about play styles. Obviously, the styles are different. But if I kind of look at it here, and I'm going to kind of pull a half and half on my computer screen here, Tua and Darnold are in the number one category. Beginning of the season, everyone thought Sam Darnold was going to be the number one pick. Oh, he's not most pro-ready. That was Josh Rosen that we kept saying about, but most people liked Sam Darnold, what he could bring to the table. So most people were like, oh, Sam Darnold's going to be the number one pick. Then number two, most people were throwing out a Josh Rosen. That's kind of like our Jake Fromm here, where they're kind of in the same boat, except for like Rosen was, people are saying a lot more pro-ready. I don't hear that as much with Fromm. But Fromm is right now what we're saying is the number two pick. So they get kind of paired off together. Then this is where the differences start coming in, where I would say the rest of it after Rosen and Darnold, it was really who you liked better. I would say Baker would be number three, but most people like Josh Allen. But there were questions about Josh Allen because he was coming from a smaller college, and does he just have a big arm? Baker was kind of like he was putting it together with the stats, and then had the Heisman at the end of the year. And then Lamar Jackson was just, hey, let me do it on the ground. Where besides that, this is where the analogy kind of ends, because this is where the quarterbacks start getting very different. But my point is, we thought Darnold and Rosen would be 1-2 when the draft rolled out, but it didn't end that way. Darnold was the second quarterback off the board, and he was the third overall pick, not the first overall pick. Many people thought, hey, Rosen would be the second quarterback off the board. He was the fourth quarterback off the board to the Arizona Cardinals, and that had to wait until pick number 10. And many people thought Baker Mayfield would be the fourth quarterback. Even up until the draft, people were like, oh, Baker Mayfield will be the fourth pick, like the fourth quarterback off the board. Darnold, Rosen, Allen, they're all going to go above Baker. Baker goes number one. So, like, for me, if Jalen Hurts can continue to put up the numbers that he is currently putting up, I say, why not? Like, why can't he be the number one overall pick? And that kind of leads me into the discussion of, because the interesting thing then is, let's say Jalen Hurts wins the Heisman and is the number one overall pick. That would mean for the third year in a row, the Heisman would be an Oklahoma player. That would also mean for the third year in a row, the first overall pick would be an Oklahoma player, to where you almost got to look at Lincoln Riley and go, is his system just producing these quarterbacks? Because Baker Mayfield solidified himself as the Cleveland starter. I know he's in year 2, and you still got growing to do if you're Baker, but he's the starter of the Cleveland Browns, and there's no question about that. Then you look at Arizona, where Arizona traded Josh Rosen because they drafted Kyler Murray, number one. I think we could see a same system or a same trend here if Jalen Hurts, I almost said Josh Rosen, if Jalen Hurts continues this trend and what he's doing. And like, I look at the schedule and he can do it. Like the Big 12 this year, besides Texas, isn't really that strong to me. And plus, out of the non-conference games that they play, like UCLA isn't really that strong of a game. And if you look at what happened at Texas, or in the game against Texas for both Baker and Kyler. Kyler lost, but he threw for 300 yards, 4 touchdowns, and an INT, ran for a touchdown as well. And then Baker against Texas went 2 touchdowns, 1 INT, had about 300 yards. So, I mean, you don't have to have a lights-out game. Let's say if Jalen finishes with about, I'll say 40 touchdowns, that's what he's got to get to. And right now, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 games left. He's on pace for, 36? So, I mean, yeah, he'd have to have some games in there of 6 touchdowns, 5 touchdowns. He's really going to have to blow it up in some games, and I think he can. Kansas is a little different, but I think he can blow up in that game. Baylor, I think he can blow up. And, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how he goes. But if he continues on this trend, I would not, and especially if he brings Oklahoma to the playoff and to the national championship and wins the national championship, we could be looking at Jalen Hurts as potential number 1 pick territory. And the thing that I like that he said after game 1, I don't know if this is just him trying to say the right thing or if he actually thinks like this. This is something that's going to come out in the combine interviews, but just his mind. I feel like what's above the shoulders. You guys have heard me a lot in draft conversations, either here on the PTP or on the TOK, where I've said what's above the shoulders is 1,000,000 times more important than what's below it. And yes, Tua Tagovailoa, I would say, has more tools below the shoulders than Jalen Hurts. But not by much, but he does. But Jalen Hurts, and I'm not saying he has this better than Tua, I'm speaking just about Jalen right now, not comparing them. Jalen after game 1, I'm liking what I'm seeing above the shoulders. And no, I'm not talking about the looks of Jalen Hurts' face. I'm talking about his mind, what's in there. And even after a big win against Houston, where he played very well, had 6 total touchdowns, 3 on the ground, 3 in the air, he was still looking at it. It was like, hey, it wasn't a perfect game. I can do better with this. I can do better with that. And when you're a team in the NFL, that's what you want. You want someone who's going to meticulously look at those details and look at how they can get better. Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, the greats, they were all like this. So, like I said, I don't know Jalen Hurts personally. I don't know if he was just saying that to say it or if that's how he really thinks. But if that's how he really thinks, and like I said, it's going to come out during combine interviews when these coaches and these scouts and these GMs start talking to him at the combine, they're going to get a sense for who he is. And I feel like, I'm just going to say it, like I feel like that's who he is. That's how he thinks. Lincoln Riley is probably one that instills that also. Like, you can't put that in the player, but once it's there, like if it's there, you can nurture it. And I think Lincoln Riley helps nurture that. So it's like, that's one thing where I'm going to just say right here, don't be surprised if Jalen Hurts is the number 1 overall pick. Like, I think he's going to play himself into, right now, I think it's going to be between him and Tua at the end of the year. I think how this is going to play out is Tua and Hurts are going to be, after the season's over, okay, which one are you picking, number 1, number 2? Then after that, okay, once they're off the board, is it Fromm or is it Herbert? And then after that, like, I feel like Hurts is going to play himself into this number 1 pick discussion. I think it will be either between him and Tua, and I think it's a 50-50 shot between him and Tua, depending on what happens the rest of the year as well. So this is where I kind of want to turn it on to you, though. What do you guys think? Jalen Hurts, am I speaking craziness after 2 weeks? Am I overreacting? Ricky, he hasn't played anybody. Like, Houston isn't even that tough of an opponent. South Dakota is a nobody. Or do you really think there's some truth to these words? Could Jalen Hurts be the number 1 pick in the NFL draft? Let me know what you guys are thinking, because also the thing I didn't mention is, looking after week one, I know things are going to spread out. Miami's probably going to be the number one pick. They are god awful. After that Raven game, Tampa Bay isn't much better. Like, I think if Tampa Bay is number one, like, Tampa will need a quarterback. Nick Foles is injured. I mean, Minshew looked good, and I'm going to be rooting for Minshew this year. But if Jacksonville's just as bad because they lost Foles for a few weeks, they could be looking for a quarterback. Cincy could be looking for a quarterback, although they didn't play bad in week one against the Seahawks. And then after that, like, I don't think a lot of these teams that are 0-1 are going to be at the top of the draft. The big two that I'm looking at is Tampa and Miami, and Winston didn't look good. I think they replace him at the end of the year. Miami, they drafted Rosen. That's the only reason why I kind of feel like they may not draft a quarterback, but I feel like there are going to be some quarterback-needy teams at the top. Jalen Hurts could be in prime contention for that number one pick, although right now at this point, I'm not going to go out and stand on the soapbox and say he will be the number one pick, but I think he's the second quarterback off the board. I think he's moved up from about 5 on the list to number 2 above Jacob Fromm. But let me know what you guys are thinking down below.